I was born in Morrow County, which is down there by Lexington. It's actually, I was born in a place called Buckhorn Tavern. And it was right on the corner of 97 and 314.
What was Buckhorn Tavern?
Buckhorn Tavern was a place where stagecoaches would come in, and they had a bar there. It was like an Old West situation where a lot of people come in and have fun and all that. And there was always a lot of things that happened there. Like sometimes I heard there was a murder there at one time. But anyway, that's where I was supposed to be born. Evidently, my mother died when I was 3 years old, and my dad had 6 kids, and he couldn't take care of all of us kids. I had 4 sisters and a brother. And when my mother died, I actually didn't know her. I was with my dad up on where Clear Fork Lake is now. There was no lake there at that time. He was plowing and with a team of horses, and I was walking behind a walking plow, just having fun, throwing stones and stuff like that. These 2 guys, well dressed, came up and started talking to my dad, and I had no idea what they were talking about. But 2 days later, I was on my way to the Methodist Children's Home in Worthington, Ohio, and I was there for probably 5 years. I started school in Worthington, Ohio, and the next year I had to go to school at Westerville. But I was in this children's home for approximately 4 years, and I had a good time there, and it was the best thing that ever happened as far as I can tell right now. My dad gave me, when he left, he gave me 25 cents. And actually, I never saw my dad again until I was married. I had a grandmother that lived in Johnsville, and when I stayed at the children's home until somebody would take me in and put me in like a foster care. And that's when I stayed there for probably 4 years. And when I came back to Johnsville, I tried to live with my grandmother, but she couldn't take care of me and my sister both. And it was back in the days of a situation where she didn't have any money, and it was hard for her to take care of any of us. So I stayed with her until some people would take me in as a foster son, where I had to work on a farm. And I finally wound up working with my uncle on a farm until such time as he passed away. And when he passed away, the farm was sold to a family in Mansfield. And they knew my situation. I was in high school, and I played basketball, baseball, and it was in school plays. And the family that took me in wouldn't let me take part in anything in school because he wanted me to work on the farm. And I would walk by the old farm, my uncle's farm, when I'd go to school. I had to walk to school every morning. And the people that bought the farm, I used to stop and visit with them. And they had 4 kids of their own. And one day I stopped there to talk to them, and they knew my situation about school and what I could do and what I couldn't do. And they asked me, they said, well, why don't you come and live with us? And a couple of weeks later, I made up my mind. I didn't have anybody that could tell me what to do and what not to do. So I said, okay, I'll come and live with you. So I lived with this family for, such time as I got out of high school. I stayed there until and I called them Mom and Dad Nicholas. They were very good people. And they had 3 boys and 2 girls. And then I would have been the 6th one. And I stayed there until I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And after I graduated from high school, I couldn't get a job. It was back in the days of when you couldn't get an education or anything of that nature. So I decided I got to do something. So this was back in I graduated from high school in 1940. And I decided, since I didn't get a job for anything, I worked in cemetery lots and mowed grass and all that, and worked on different farms, like picking potatoes and cutting corn and all this and that. So I decided to join the 3 Cs, which is a Civilian Conservation Corps. It was promoted by President Roosevelt. And I was sent to a 3C camp in Boise, Idaho. And I stayed there for 6 months. And after I graduated from there, or I mean, I didn't actually graduate. My time was served, and I had to come back home. But they were trying to recruit people in the service. We had Marine recruiters, Navy recruiters, and I kept saying, I want to go home first. So I went home and got a job at Tappan Company. And then Pearl Harbor came along, and I got laid off because they were changing over to war production. And the first thing I knew that there was, everybody was being recruited, not recruited so much as being drafted into the service. And I decided I wanted to get into the Navy. So I actually joined the Navy a week or 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor. And
so do you think that there was, before the U.S. entered, before Pearl Harbor, was there a sentiment by either you or the general consensus? Did you guys feel that the U.S. would ultimately get involved in this thing?
I had a good premonition of what was taking place, and I could see that we were eventually going to get into the service and get into the war situation.
Where were you at when Pearl Harbor was attacked?
I was working on a farm, my uncle's farm, and I was went down to the barn to milk. I was milking cows that morning. It just so happened that I had a portable radio, and I heard that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and that's when I first found out about the Pearl Harbor situation. Well, the average day was something that you couldn't put your finger on. You couldn't depend on a day of a schedule of any type. You just had to do what had to be done that day. If you worked on the farm, you did all the farm work that was necessary, and you had to take care of anything that was normal during the day, and not think too much of what was going down the road. You just had to take care of things in order, day by day.
Did you guys have plenty to eat?
Not too much. At that time, it was in the day of the. I can't put my finger on what to call it anymore. It's. I know a lot of times that my food was when I stayed at my aunt and uncle, they didn't have enough food for themselves, and many at night I used to eat hardtack and ribble soup. That's pretty much what we had. We didn't have too much availability of any things in the grocery stores or anything of that nature. In fact, I didn't even know what a grocery store was at that time.
What did you guys do to, I guess, acquire enough food to make it through the week and then through like even winter?
Well, everybody, when you lived on the farm, you always had a good garden. You always put things out in the garden, and you could get food that way. You always have corn, and you have to can different things for later on, so you could. And the family that you lived with, they'd do baked bread and had cows. You'd always have milk and things like that, and you had to get along the best way you could. You didn't have any other way to do it. I stayed at 5 or 6 different families when I was growing up until I got out to the point where I started high school, and. I stayed at one widow woman whose husband just passed away, and she needed somebody to do odd chores and things like that. And I was going to a one-room school at that time, and it was right across the field from where she lived. And I went there until I was in the 6th grade. And then from there on, I went to another family on a farm and did the same kind of work until I managed to get to high school. And then, of course, that was... I didn't have any family that pushed me to tell me what to do, anything, what was right and what was wrong.
There's no guidance.
No, and I no guidance whatsoever. And I just had to go along with the kids that I lived with and the kids that I went to school with, and more or less went along with what they had to do and what had to be done. In Morrow County, which is down there by Lexington, it's actually. I was born in a place called Buckhorn Tavern. It was right on the corner of 97 and 314.